Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow, never seen a place so full of cobwebs and dust. When you said we were going to investigate a haunted house, I thought it would be in someone's residence in the suburbs. Oh my God!
Well, Tim, not every haunted house is some old Victorian mansion next to a cemetery. This place has quite a history of ghosts of all types. The owners left in the middle of the night because there was all kinds of poltergeist activity.
I suppose ghosts were popping out of the wall.
No, so they say. Just like the one popping up right behind you.
Damn, that's nasty. We better get back to the studio before something tragic might happen, something we might regret later.
I think I heard the ghost whistling at us.
I believe so, yeah. Well, hey, when you're in the shape I'm in, that anything is possible.
That's right.
That's the doctor whistling for me to come in.
Oh, there you go. It's like, come right in, Mr. Beckley.
That's right. Oh boy.
Oh my.
Well, Halloween was a couple of months ago already, Tim. So let's clear the air here, if that's possible. And let's get on with the evening's festivities. I understand we're going to be talking about spooks and things that go bump in the night, and probably cobwebs for real, but we'll have to find that out, won't we?
Well, I don't think there's any cobwebs involved.
No cobwebs.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe here in my office in the corners, but not so much.
That's your cat's whiskers. Your cat's whiskers.
That's right. Cat's whiskers.
Anyway, let us hear about who we will be speaking with this evening. I'm anxious to find out.
Well, we're going to be talking about a really fascinating case, and I think that we actually first heard about this a couple of years ago from Steve Mara and Jenny Ashford when they were on our show at one point. So I'm happy now that we were able to line up Keith Linder. Now, Keith was the person who was him and his girlfriend were living in this really unexplained haunted house in Bothell, Washington. Now, Keith Linder.
Did you say Bothell, Washington?
No, Bothell. No. You're thinking about Nevada.
There you go. Well, that's the alien brothel that the guy just died recently. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And got elected to Congress, Senate, something like that.
Yeah. After he was dead.
After he was dead. Yeah. Okay. Let me. So now Keith Linder is an IT professional, originally from Austin, Texas, and now living outside of Seattle. Now, what brought Keith to the Pacific Northwest was his love for the outdoors, his love for software and hardware technology. In 2012, him and his girlfriend moved into a house right outside of Seattle in a town called Bothell. Now, the horrors that they witnessed while living there not only changed their lives, but the paranormal community as well. So Keith says that whether you are a believer or a non-believer about what might go bumping in the night, all he asks is that you learn his story, pause it, and then view the evidence. And there's a considerable amount of evidence, Tim. Keith has a YouTube channel that just has all kinds of fascinating videos on it, and I highly recommend our listeners check it out. And he says that once you look at this evidence, it'll change your life forever. Now, also with us, and a return visit, I may say, to Exploring the Bizarre is Jenny Ashford. Now, Jenny started out as a horror writer, and I think she still is, but got sucked into the world of the paranormal like Slimer into a proton pack. Her first nonfiction book, The Mammoth Mountain Poltergeist, detailed the terrifying account of poltergeist-focused Tom Ross and the paranormal encounters he endured with his family in 1982. Now, from there, Jenny became acquainted with well-regarded British parapsychologist and our good friend Steve Mera, and she wrote other books, including The House of Fire and Whispers, investigating the Seattle Demon House, which we'll be talking about tonight. Her other books include The Unseen Hand, a new exploration in poltergeist phenomena, The Faceless Villain, a collection of the eeriest unsolved murders of the 20th century, with volumes 1 and 2. Now, Jenny started her journey as a hardline skeptic, but through her association with Tom and Steve, and after witnessing a few unexplicable things herself, she's changed her views quite a bit. Now, Jenny also co-hosts a podcast with Tom Ross called 13 O'Clock, which they discuss paranormal weirdness, true crime, unexplained mysteries, and other fun and creepy topics. All of her books can be found on Amazon, and you can visit her at her website at jennyashford.com. So I want to welcome both of you tonight to Exploring the Bizarre.
Hello, and thanks for having me on. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, it's great to be back.
Pleasure having both of you on. So, Keith, why don't we let's start out with you, since this basically is your story. So, you originally came from Texas and got a great job in Seattle, and you and your girlfriend decided to look for a place to live.
Yeah, I had moved to Seattle back in 2005 and met Tina in 2010. And we had been together 2 years before we moved into the Bothell house. And what we decided after being in our relationship for 2 years was, hey, let's, instead of paying 2 mortgages or 2 rents, let's pay 1. Let's, try to see how we do under one roof. Now that we've been together 2 years, let's take the relationship to the next level. And so we did. I think we started looking for that house April of 2012 because we found it on Craigslist. And I think we saw it in April and then applied for it in late April and got accepted by the then homeowner.
So you didn't buy the house. This was a rental.
Yeah, this was a rental property, yes.
And was there any indication straight off that there was something, I don't know, peculiar about this place?
Not when we toured the house, when we first saw it. What I tell people is what was peculiar about the house was when we went and got the keys to the house and signed the leasing papers, and you meet the landlord, you do the handshake, and you tour the house together again, and then he leaves. But that day, we're sitting in the living room, me and Tina. House is empty; it hasn't been moved in, and we're just sort of taking it all in, sort of laying down the area of what's going to go where, what's going to sit here, whose room is what and whatnot. And out of the blue, in the middle of a conversation, it's a 2-story home, we hear a kid cough. And it just out of the blue, very distinct, sounded very real, sounded like it came from one of the rooms upstairs. And it paused us in our conversation because Tina asked me, and I asked her at the same time, was that a kid cough? And we kind of wrestled with it, looking around, but we didn't move from our position, but we just sort of looked around and like, where could that have come from? Because, the lights haven't been turned on yet. There's no furniture. There's no appliances in. And that noise was pretty loud. But we didn't go investigate it. We just shrugged it off as saying or thinking that had to have come from outside. That's the only logical explanation. But man, did it sound like it came nearby.
Now, this house, I mean, it wasn't a very old house to begin with when you moved in, was it?
No, it's a new house. This house was built, I believe, October, December of 2005. The entire neighborhood, for that matter, is a new neighborhood. All the houses there are tract homes built in 2005. You're talking about 80 to 120 homes. It's a big neighborhood. And all the homes, or every other home, looks identical to the other. So that was one of the things that we were attracted to about the home, was the newness of it. It was a new home, and it was kind of weird for a home to be 5, 6, 7 years old at the time we moved in. We didn't know at the time, but we found out later, it had already been lived in by 5 to 6, 7 different families.
Oh, wow. Huh. And and of course, the landlord never came forward and said, "Oh, by the way, the other people who lived in the house may have had some, odd occurrences."
He was out of there. And looking back, in the 4 years I've lived there, I always tell people, in the 4 years I've lived there, he's only been to the house twice. And this is after the activity we had been experiencing went public, went national, went international. The homeowner, even when Ghost Adventures descended on the scene, he never came to the house. He never came to see for himself, or to see whether me and Tina were legit, or tearing up the property, or just trying to break our lease in a weird way. The time he came back to the house was 4 years, almost 4 years to the day, was May 8th, 2016, and that's when I moved out.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he didn't have experiences of his own there that he wasn't going to talk about, and he was just going to stay the hell away.
Yeah, because he was living at home, obviously.
Keith, is there anybody that's moved in since you moved out?
Yeah, husband and wife moved in, I think 6 weeks, if I'm not sure, 2 months after I moved out. And it was a husband and wife, no children, no kids. It was recommended by Steve and Dawn Phillips to the homeowner and to myself. The best thing to do would probably just to leave the house vacant for as long as possible. The theory then amongst Steve and Dawn was there's low-level activity. It's quite possible a regular family might not even notice the level 1 or low-level activity. However, just to be careful and just to be due diligence, if the homeowner has it within his power to keep the house vacant for as long as possible, nothing bad can come out of that. But of course, the Bothell, Washington is a booming suburb outside Seattle. Houses sell within 11 days here, and I think that house sold within 11 days.
So now, what can you describe for us some of the more outrageous activity?
Oh, yeah. Well, some of the activity that the house is known for, 3 Bibles caught fire. There was a poster fire that required me summoning the fire department onto the scene. Large objects got thrown. I'm talking about extremely large objects. 300-pound armoire, couch, love seat, bar stool. And then the wall writings. The wall writings in my office, which is the only room in the house to have wall writings. Numerous instances of inexplicable wall writings that you cannot, when you look at it with the naked eye, determine what the substance was or is. And it just happened. I mean, all that I just told you happened during the summer, fall, winter of 2014. But loud bangs, things familiar that I'm pretty sure Jenny could tell you, this, pretty much textbook poltergeist phenomena, loud bangs, phantom footsteps. The interesting thing to me was the kitchen cabinet doors always opening, or you wake up in the morning and come downstairs for a cup of coffee and every kitchen cabinet door is wide open, or you come home from work and every kitchen cabinet door is wide open, the house is upside down, and just a lot of weird stuff, shadows, shadow figures, you name it, it went on in that house.
Is that all? Well, I mean, reading your book, I mean, it's just we could spend 5 or 6 shows just recounting everything that went on in your house. So I mean, it's just it's like, where do you begin to talk about all of the things that happened in your house? And I suppose that a lot of people would ask, okay, wait, you were there for 4 years.
Yeah.
Why did you stay for so long?
Well, it's sort of explained in the book, and that's a good question. Me and Tina moved in 2012, obviously. However, the activity did subside for a year and 2 months in 2013. I tell it in my book that right when the activity slowed down and came to a complete halt, me and Tina thought we had dodged a bullet. The information we were getting on the internet was these things generally fade off by themselves, and then you got your house back. So we thought, we got cheated out of the first year. Let's try to salvage the 2013. What happened in 2014, almost a year later, I mean, just rewrites everything, because it's 10 times worse in 2014 than it was in 2012. And I think if you read the book about the poster fire, me and Tina, after the poster card fire, felt deep within ourselves that, number one, this house is not worth living in by anybody. Me personally, this is my first house. I just moved here a couple of years ago. I'm not really sure I want to be run out of my first house. There's no guarantee that I won't be followed. And we had people helping us. We had a local church in town, a Bothell local parish, who was instructing us, no, stand your ground. Do not run from these things, or you'll be running for the rest of your life. So we thought we had a support system in place. Obviously, we were a little bit wrong. Of course, we were a lot naive, because nothing you can read about in books or see in movies prepares you for the real thing when you're living with it. But we wanted to stand our ground, and we thought we had a support system.
Well, you were also rather fascinated. Probably isn't quite the word, but I mean, you were interested.
I was interested, yeah,
in what was going on, and wanted to really kind of find out, maybe the reason why it was happening.
Yeah, in IT, I've been in IT for 20 odd years, and one of the things that we live by is problem solving. I'm a very analytical, or I try to be, and I'm a project manager in the IT space. And yeah, there were elements, or the phenomena, or certain phenomena, I should say, because keep in mind, we're witnessing the laws of physics being manipulated or broken right in front of our eyes. And from my IT, and I'm sort of IT/geeky type of guy who grew up watching science fiction, that was kind of interesting, if not cool. What wasn't cool was, hey, you can't be burning my house down. You can't be throwing chef knives at me. You can't be writing on this wall, I don't own this place. Stop that. But yeah, there was the other side of, okay, obviously something went on in this house before me and Tina arrived. Let's do a little bit of research. Let's call some people. Let's bring some subject matter experts in, which we realize there's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just try to do this while at the same time, we have no clue what we're dealing with, or no clue what we're getting ourselves involved with. We were really, super naive.
Well, plus, people tend to look for patterns, cause and effect, things
exactly.
Things like that, yeah. And some of the to me amusing things that's I've been researching and investigating this type of stuff for years and years, and have seen it firsthand for myself, is some of the suggestions that you got, like you said, from some of these, like so-called experts, from, bringing Bibles and crucifixes into the house, to smudging, which is very interesting. The effect that you got from the smudging. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point, because we all watch these medical commercials on TV where they say, "Hey, try this pill. It's going to fix this problem." Mm-hmm. However, there's a disclaimer underneath that says it's known to cause this type of reaction. Well, that's what smudging is, but nobody had ever told us what some of the downside reaction could be. Like if you told me, Keith, you and Tina need to smudge, but you need to understand that you might have your couch being thrown at you if you do. I might have been more cautious or more studying them on the way I smudged, because we were just smudging, waving a smudge stick around. There was really no how-to book on how to do it properly. So we're running around the house smudging, saying chants, and we don't know what we're doing per se. And in reality, we found out later that could make a situation worse, because later on we found out, even through some of Steve and Dawn's EVPs, that they respond negatively to smudging. And believe it or not, when the poster caught fire, which was the morning, I believe in April or May, Tina had smudged the house tremendously the night before, so much to the point that the house filled up with smoke and would set off the smoke alarms, because we thought, our mindset was more means more power. The more you smudge and get them choking and coughing, they'll run out of here. And true and behold, we didn't know, oh, y'all can create fires. Oh, okay, well, that makes smudging pointless then. If you can create fires at will, then I need to put away my smudge stick.
Well, not only fires, but water as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, you actually had some puddles up here.
The water puddle. That was Halloween night, November 1st of 2014, and that was interesting. That at the time was the first and last time we had water puddles in the home. And by then I didn't know the word, or was not familiar with the term poltergeist. Mm-hmm. But after doing research, I learned that's once again within the realm of poltergeist activity, the inexplicable appearance of water puddles.
Now, did the water fall from this? In a lot of the poltergeist case, the water seems to originate from the ceiling. Or did
we weren't home. We came home from a Halloween party, and our home was upside down. I mean, this is one of the worst attacks the house had experienced. And there on the floor in the kitchen was the water puddles. Interesting enough, a book that neither Tina and me had owned was sitting on the kitchen table. We still to this day don't know where that book came from. All the wine in my wine rack was rearranged and neatly rearranged on the floor. The kitchen cabinet doors, once again, all open, and everything else turned upside down, in addition to the water puddles.
What was the book? What was the title? Do you remember?
It was a wine book. It was a wine notebook, something that you would write notes in on as to what year and favorite wine it was. But I didn't own it. Tina didn't own it. We'd never seen it before, and it was resting on the kitchen table. My thinking now is it probably belonged to one of the previous tenants, and I'm saying that based on the other items that appeared in the house that neither Tina and me owned, that we later found out did belong to some of the previous tenants.
All right. Well, we're coming up on our bottom of the hour break, so why don't we go ahead and take it, Tim? And when we come back, we'll bring Jenny Ashford into the conversation with Keith Linder, myself, Tim Beckley, on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
I'm trying to find my bottle of holy water here.
No, don't get the holy water out. Don't get the Bibles or the crucifixes, because time and time again, that just pisses the poltergeist off.
Well, I tell you, remember Paul Eno told us that how he managed to get the poltergeist to go away is by telling jokes.
Yeah.
So,
it took the energy out of it.
Yeah. So invite me to your house. Have a couple of bottles available, and within a half an hour's time, the ghost will be gone. I don't know.
Anyway, with the jokes that we tell, Tim, we'll probably just make it worse.
Oh well, there'll be 3 poltergeists in the house all of a sudden.
There you go. All right.
Now, Jenny, what exactly is your involvement with the case? I mean, You've written about it, obviously, and have you ever witnessed anything firsthand yourself?
Yes, although I didn't until I was much older. As you said in the intro, I was always a skeptic of the paranormal. I mean, I was kind of into it when I was a teenager, but then I kind of got more and more skeptical as I got older. But then, through my association with Tom Ross and, his whole poltergeist thing, which was the Mammoth Mountain Poltergeist, which was the first nonfiction paranormal that I wrote, I started getting, less skeptical about it because, I believed his story. He had other people backing him up and stuff like that. So I kind of was like, well, I'd really like to see some of it myself because I never really got to see it. And the more that I wrote about it and the more I talked about it, the more I discussed it, after I, made my association with Steve Mara and we started working on books together and we were working on the Rochdale poltergeist. And then all of a sudden we had some minor poltergeist activity start in our house where it had never started before. Nothing all that spectacular, but enough that, it was obviously paranormal. Like there really wasn't another explanation for it. And so the fact that I got to see it firsthand, I was like, I wasn't even scared. I was like really excited because I was like, my whole life I've wanted to see this and I've heard other people's experiences and I wasn't sure how seriously to take them. But now I know that this can really happen, even though, like I said, ours was not really that exciting. It was just like a few things moving around, but a lot of people witnessed it. We were all there at the same time. So, that was kind of a nice thing for me to, since I write about it and I like to keep a skeptical stance about it also, just so I can kind of keep objective about it. But I did want to see it for myself just so I could have that experience. I felt like it would make the writing better.
You made Jenny, you made an interesting point one time, and with the exception of, houses, say like Keith's, which, seem to be, like a hurricane contained, within the four walls, that there's a possibility that that everybody may experience a poltergeist phenomena every now and then, but for the most part, it's pretty low key. And most people just brush it off as just, oh well, I put my keys down on the counter and now they're gone. I must have just spaced it and put them someplace else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's kind of a lot of that going on because even a lot of the stuff that happened at our house was, it had some plausible deniability to it. It's like, the doorbell rang at 4:30 and no one was there. The garage door opened by itself. Just things like that, like a statue fell off of a shelf by itself. Things like that, that if you were disinclined to want to think that it was paranormal, you would just write it off as, oh, it was just, a truck went by and something fell off or, it just things like that. So I feel like there's probably a lot more of it going on, but because so much of it is like that kind of thing where it's this whole gray area where it could possibly have a rational explanation. Yeah, I just put a thing down and I forgot that I put it there. It didn't really move on its own, but, maybe you didn't. So there could be a lot more poltergeist activity going on than we're aware of. It's just most of it is so minor that I don't think people really notice it.
Well, I'll give you a good example here. This happened to me just a couple of months ago. I had returned from the grocery store, and I had bought myself a juice drink, and I usually treat myself to this every time I go to the store. When I come home, put it in a specific spot in the refrigerator. Unpack my groceries, and then a little later go back to get it. Did all that, go back to get it. It's not there. And I was like, did I put it there? I thought I put it there. Go back out to the car, check all my places. Nope, it's not there. Go down to the freezer. Did I accidentally put it in the freezer? Nope, it's not there. Well, I must have forgot and didn't buy it. Went about my daily activity. Later, went back to the refrigerator. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah. Yes. And of course, my wife, who is, She is a skeptic, but she's a skeptic because she's afraid of this kind of stuff. So, she kind of keeps herself in denial that this stuff doesn't exist, in case it does,
Plausible deniability, yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And, she's like, you just, it was man, she calls it, like man blindness, when you send your husband to the refrigerator to get something, and he's like, well, where is it? It's right there on the shelf. Well, I don't see it. It's right there. Damn it. But I'm certain it wasn't man blindness. Yeah.
I have the opposite version of that. I can look in the refrigerator and see something right in front of my face and not see it.
But go ahead, Keith. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, in a joking matter, what you just described and what Jenny just described as far as the theory of a lot of people probably experience this phenomenon, don't even know it. I believe that's true because one of the things that got me and got us in trouble, and I guess I'm just wired this way, is I would leave my office sometime to go get a glass of water downstairs, and I come back upstairs and my light is off. And that would happen about 3 or 4 times, and you just shrug it off, like, okay, maybe I forgot, maybe I wasn't thinking, or I turned the light off. But I would literally be going to bed and not thinking, now why would I turn my light off when I'm coming back to the room? So I started putting cameras in the hallway and in my doorway and in my office just to see what was going on. And when I started catching the video phenomena, then I started bringing in more cameras, and the more cameras I brought in, it was like toys to the spirits, because that's when the first camera got thrown or put face down or unplugged or outright taken to where it's still missing, because I'm bringing more electronics into the house. But it was really those subtle things, because I'm the type of person, I don't lose anything. I mean, when you live by yourself for as long as I have, you just don't lose and misplace stuff. You become a creature of habit. And I tell in my book, the first thing that went missing was my car keys, the ones I never use. And they were in the glove box and they went missing. So I just started thinking and keeping notes, keeping records. And true enough, as you start looking for the activity, they started increasing the activity to where, there is something here. That object did move. I saw it. Tina saw it, and then the camera started moving. So yeah.
Well, when you say, Keith, when you say they, who are they? Do you have any idea?
I use the they word in regard based on the numbers of EVPs that Steve Don and others have captured. I mean, they captured so many EVPs, and a majority of them were different voices. I mean, you have male voice, female voice. You had Irish accent, non-Irish accent. You had kid voice, child voice. So I use they. One of my favorite EVPs that Steve and Don caught was when they were in my hallway and they're setting up equipment, going back to what we just talked about, and they're setting up equipment in the hallway, and they pick up these voices. They can't hear them with the naked ear. They found them upon review of the footage, and these 2 male voices whispering under Don Steve saying, "It's a camera. It's a camera." And it's clear voice, like you and I are talking, just as clear as day, 2 male voices, and they're whispering, sort of snickering, trying to guess the equipment that Steve and Don are using. So I use the word they because a lot of teams came in, and it was just an enormous amount of EVPs of different dialects, different voices, different decibel ranges, to where I tell people there was probably at any given Sunday, no less than 11 spirits in the house. I say much more than that, but no less than 11.
Jenny, now the experiences that Keith and Tina went through, parapsychologists, I mean, they love to categorize everything. And we've been referring to what's been going on as like poltergeist phenomena, but this seems to go way beyond that. It goes way beyond poltergeist. It goes way beyond, like traditional hauntings, whatever that could be. I mean, it's like that we're talking about something just really out of the ballpark.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the main reasons that Steve Mera was so excited to kind of research this one further and, wanted to write a book about it because he's like, we've never really seen a case like this. And he's been doing it for 35 years at this point, where so much of it was centered around poltergeist activity, apportations, things, doors opening and, random noises, like unexplained noises. He's like, but then to have gotten so many EVPs, I mean, they got hundreds and hundreds of EVPs, just a ridiculous amount. And like Keith said, it was a whole bunch of different voices, and most of them seemed interactive. They seemed to be answering questions that were posed to them, or they seemed to be commenting on the action at hand, which is very, very unusual. And most of them were very, very clear. And, also the more they researched the history of the property, because, as Keith said, the house was not very old, it seemed more like a haunting than poltergeist activity. It was almost like a combination of the two things, which they don't really see. I mean, there's not usually a lot of crossover because there was so much. I mean, because the, former residents of the house had also reported unusual activity. Before the house was even built, there had been a prior house on that particular piece of property, whereas the surrounding neighborhood had just been empty forest land, as far as I can remember. So it did seem to have a history, and that maybe these were actually intelligent spirits that were listening to the living people and were answering and trying to interact with them at some stage. But then it had kind of this veneer of poltergeist activity. And now whether it was two different things going on, or whether this was just a particular area that was just active for this type of thing, and it was just attracting all different types of energies, they never could really determine. I mean, as we were saying earlier, no one's really an expert in this type of stuff. I mean, yeah, you can do it a long time, you can see a lot of stuff, but, in the end, this is a really unusual case, having all of these different facets to it. And I don't know if anyone will ever get to the bottom of what exactly was causing it, whether it was something in the land or something, with the house, or, who knows, but or something with the history, even, some type of spirit or some type of, traumatic incident in the past that happened there, or whatever. It could even be maybe it's some kind of a spiritual vortex or something like that, where it's just kind of one special area that kind of draws all this kind of energy to it.
You had, I know that when you were doing research on the property and had discovered that there had been another house or a cabin, I think is how you referred to it, on the property years before, and that the original occupants had gone to prison, were sent to prison for life. Have you ever been able to uncover why they went to prison? What had happened?
I think it was something, I mean, as far as I can recall, Steve was telling me, it's very difficult to kind of obtain records from that far back,
right.
But I don't think it was anything, I don't think it was murder or anything like that. I would think it was more along the lines of, theft or embezzlement or something along those kind of lines.
Yeah, the white collar kind. White collar.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm not really sure, I don't think the cabin was there very long. I believe it was there in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. But as far as I can remember, Steve telling me and sending me some of the documents that, that particular piece, it had just been a cabin on this particular piece of land. And, the land surrounding it had just been forest land that was later cleared, to build the neighborhood, but there hadn't been anything. So I thought that was kind of interesting because, I mean, evidently no one else in that neighborhood has reported any type of paranormal activity, not to the public anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is funny though, that, there had been, some kind of building there beforehand, and then Keith's house is the only one, as far as that has this kind of activity. But I guess, though, that the area itself had some problems in the past with Irish immigrants and the Native Americans who were living there?
Yeah, it was, I believe it was some type of, like a logging community and a lot of Irish immigrants that worked in the logging industry at some point. And there were skirmishes between them and Native American tribes. Evidently, there were deaths on both sides. So that might have explained. And actually, Steve Mara and Don Phillips have told me that they were not aware of that history before they went there to research the property. But because they were getting so many EVPs, where the voices had very distinct Irish accents, they thought that was very strange. So they started looking more into the history of the area and finding out that there were actually a lot of Irish immigrants living in this area. So it's possible that these voices could have belonged to people that once lived in that area or died in that area or what have you. But yeah, there does seem to be, a long history of that type of thing going on in that area.
Well, and I do know, especially from records from the East Coast, that Irish immigrants that were brought over to work on building the railroads, if they would die in the process, they were basically just dumped into a grave, and sometimes a mass grave, and covered over, and everyone went on with their work. So it makes you wonder if that may not have been, the same situation. And of course, with the Native Americans, if their kind had run off and the bodies were left behind, everybody would just be dumped into a grave, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just to put a add to that discussion, we did find out, and this is easily accessible online if you research the history of Bothell and Snohomish County. Back in the mid-1800s, I don't know the exact year because I don't have my notes with me, but sometime in the mid-1800s, there was a smallpox outbreak that decimated a Native American tribe called the Willow people, the Skycomish or Snohomish tribe, and they were in Bothell. That is a fact. They were in and around Bothell, and it was about 500 of Native Americans who caught smallpox and perished during a cold winter spell in the mid-1800s in Bothell, and were put in mass graves. Of course, nobody knows what those mass graves are, but there is document material saying this did happen. Also, if you were in here in Bothell now, I could even drive you to them. There are so many unmarked, almost shallow graves from Irish people, from Native Americans, from settlers of the 1800s. Because like you said, back then, it was a logging community. Houses were much more spread out. It was a wooded area. Hey, if you die or whatever, hey, yeah, they'll bury you then and there. You come like 100 odd years later, put in new, homes. We find bones and bodies in graves here in Seattle, in the Seattle Pacific Northwest, all the time. It makes the news every now and then, especially when a big windstorm blows in. Bodies get uncovered. They have to do some excavation. They call in the archaeologists, and they unearth and find, like I said, settlers, be it English or Native American, and they have to contact the tribes. The tribes themselves have to come in, and only they can touch their bodies. Only they can touch the remains of Native Americans. So it's a whole process behind that. But yeah, all that is still in and around Bothell, and a lot of it is relatively close to this neighborhood in that area.
Well, and some of the drawings that appeared on the wall in your office, the one that I'm thinking of particularly of the stylized human figure upside down, that had a very Native American appearance to it.
Yeah, that means a person has died already. And if you drill down on that definition even more, it means a person has died by a sickness. They became sick and ill and they died. Or it means a person is about to die. and you're right, that's a calligraphy Native American symbol that was drawn on my walls multiple times. And yeah, me seeing that and reading the part about a man is about to die, yeah, that sent chills down my spine.
Yeah. Well, were there any regular writings or notes or anything like that? Or, I think you had some on the wall that just basically said die.
Oh, then they started writing my name specifically, like Die KL and initials KL. If you look on back of Jenny's book, you'll see one of those. That happened either, I think it was on my birthday or Christmas, where they wrote Die KL. They wrote it on the front lawn, the side lawn, in the snow. and they rode it inside my car numerous times.
Hmm.
Well,
And
that would seem to be that there's a I would say an intelligence behind this. I mean, we're not just talking about
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
But I mean, what is the intelligence and why? I mean, why this? Yeah, I mean, you maybe describe some of the reasons that they picked this place, but I mean, do you think it had anything to do with you whatsoever, or just random?
No, because the family who had similar activity was in the house 5 years before me and Tina, and they spoke of a lot of the low level phenomena, the kitchen cabinets, the door slamming, the phantom footsteps. But you're right. There's a definite sign of intelligence, of premeditation, of calculation. Because
Yeah,
I mean,
more so than I would say in most of the hauntings. I would say. I mean, usually
yeah,
it's pretty just off the wall, so to speak, or something flies across the room. I mean, I know growing up, I had the little poltergeist activities, lights going on and off, and all that. But I mean, that doesn't show any. It shows a force, not more a force more than a creative intelligence. I would say.
yeah.
To
When you get
maybe different
first name
maybe we're
basis, yeah.
dealing with different dealing with different kinds of poltergeists. It's like UFO. Not all UFOs are in the same born in the same basket. I mean, and poltergeists could well be the same. I mean, they could be a heck of a lot of things. I suppose.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
well, and that's yeah. I mean, it's and I've seen this, with poltergeist activity as well. I mean, it's like whatever the intelligence, and I will put intelligence behind it is, it's always listening, and will react oftentimes to what people say. I know that people have said, "Oh, well, I've heard that poltergeists like to tear up family photos," which was, basically incorrect. But then afterwards, this house, the family photos started getting ripped apart. So, yeah. All right. Well, we are coming up to our top of the hour break. So when we come back, I want to continue this conversation with Keith and Jenny. And Jenny, I want to ask you about why this place is different from other, poltergeist locations. No teenagers, that sort of thing. So we will return in just a few minutes after our break on Exploring the Bizarre.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre, the second hour. And tonight we're talking with Keith Linder, who is the author of the book, The Bothell Hell House, and Jenny Ashford, who has written a number of books about poltergeist, including a book, The House of Fire and Whispers, about the same subject. So, Keith, one of the things that I noticed in your book, on top of all the other activity, the writings on the wall, the Bibles disappearing and then reappearing on fire, you also had a couple of apparitions.
There's two chapters dedicated to the apparition. One is called The Gray Lady and the White Lady, and that's because that's the color they were when I saw them. The Gray Lady I saw interesting. I saw her 2012, late summer 2012. And she was outside my office door. I was on the computer, and all of a sudden I hear a click. and my lights in my room go off. And naturally, when you hear a clicking noise, you turn toward the direction of the light switch. And I did. I thought Tina was playing a practical joke on me. Ha ha ha, very funny. But I look in the doorway and there's no Tina there. There's a woman standing there, but it's not Tina. And one of the things I like to reiterate to people is this apparition. I didn't know it was an apparition at the time. I was calling it a ghost, but it's really an apparition. But it's full body. There's no translucent, transparency, anything about it. And she looked kind of confused, while at the same time looked very conniving. And she darted and turned off and took off running. This all happened within less than a second. I'm still not even sure then what I'm seeing. I know what I'm seeing with my eyes, but it's not registering yet because I'm still thinking that's Tina, but it don't look like Tina. So I give chase and I turn around the hall corner, and of course the apparition is gone. The next time, fast forward to 2 years later, this is about October. I'm in my office, and now Tina, who when I saw the Gray Lady was taking a bath and taking a bubble bath, this time in 2014, Tina's outside vacuuming her truck, and it's summer, and I'm in my office, and I hear a noise coming through the hallway approaching me. It's like rustling leaves, and it's like crunch, 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 and it's getting closer and closer. And I turn toward the direction of the hallway, and true enough, here comes this lady, this woman, identical to the Gray Lady, except now she's all white. But this time she's not doing anything except being emotionless, stoic, and she walks past my doorway and goes into the guest room, which is to the right of me, and disappears. And once again, full-bodied, solid, not transparent or anything. But the thing I remember most about her was the noise I heard before she turned the corner and went by my doorway.
And if you hadn't heard that noise, you probably wouldn't have noticed her walking by.
That's what made me look over in that direction, because the noise was a precursor, if you will, because I know I'm hearing Tina out my left ear, because my left ear is facing my office window, which is to my driveway, and that's where Tina is. And I'm hearing this awful noise in my hallway. So I turned towards the direction, not knowing what I'm going to see. I knew it was unusual, and I was not expecting to see a full-bodied female, but I recognized her. And she was holding something. There's a reenactment or video reenactment of how all that went down on my YouTube channel. Some 3D animation guys from Microsoft put the video together based on the notes I gave them. And it's a pretty good reenactment of how that all went down. Hearing the noise, you see me at the computer workstation. I turn around and face the doorway, and yeah, there she just goes, walks right by.
And you saw the same woman later downstairs?
Yeah, this is downstairs now. It's back to the Gray Lady again. And I'm working, I think either from home or that night I'm working on my laptop at the kitchen table, because the activity has just got so dangerous upstairs. I don't even work in my office anymore. And all of a sudden, it's dead. So you feel a sense of being watched. It's like you ever been in the woods and all of a sudden all the animals stop breathing and making noise. So I look up from my computer and I look toward the direction of the staircase, and looking dead at me, got me dead in their sights, is the Gray Lady. She's just staring at me. Now, you don't see her body. She's got her head peeped around the wall of the staircase, and her hair is all frizzled and frazzled, and her eyes are wide open, and it looked like she had been there a while, because I've been feeling the sensation of being watched for a few seconds before I finally just quit and looked up and said, okay, if something feels weird, let me survey the house. And as soon as I looked at her, she darted upstairs. And you could hear the thumping, like if I was you and I was to start thundering up the stairs, you would hear that noise. I kid you not. That's what you heard going up the stairs all the way up until the bedroom or the bathroom in the master bedroom.
Now, there was something about the way that this woman looked. I mean, besides the fact that she was, entirely gray or entirely white. And the other time, did she resemble somebody that you knew?
Yeah, major spoiler for your listeners is because yeah, when I saw the Gray Lady back in 2012, keep in mind, I have not yet spoken to the previous tenant yet. We have not made any sort of contact. I finally got in contact with the previous tenant 2 years later. So when I saw the previous tenant, we're chatting and she's giving me their experience about the house, and we're building rapport over the weeks and months, and we're doing face chats and all that, and the activity is getting worse. I'm starting to, like, I know this face. I've seen this face before. And about the time I saw the apparition the second time, because now it's walking through the hallway, it looks more like it should be there versus the one that ran and took off running. This one seemed like a movie that was playing. It seemed like I was watching a recording or a projection of a woman walking from left to right past my door. So I saw this face longer, and I realized this is Rhonda. This is the previous tenant who used to live in the house. Based on what Rhonda told me about what went on in the house when her and her family lived there, and based on what she was going through now at the time, I was like, that's her. But keep in mind, Rhonda lives in Yakima, Washington, which is about 500 miles from Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously she's very much alive. Who is this looking like her? And at that stage of the game, I did not know terms like living apparition or crisis apparition. Those terms were foreign to me. It would be 2 more years before I realized there is a phenomenon out there known as a crisis or a living apparition. And yeah, it looked just like Rhonda, the previous tenant who lived in the house 5 years before me and Tina.
So now the previous tenants, they had similar experiences that you were having. Did she elaborate what they went through?
Yeah, how I caught her and like I said, it was more a getting lucky, and I guess in the paranormal, y'all can probably agree, it's a lot of it. You get lucky.
Sure.
But every now and then we get mail from other people. Previous tenants' mail come to the house, so you get the mail, you like toss it or whatever, or I would give it to the landlord. This one I decided to keep because I asked the landlord one time, hey, can you put me in contact with the previous tenants? He told me he's not allowed to do that. So this letter I kept, and I went on Facebook and I Googled her name. I found her, befriended her, and we chatted. And when I reached out to chat with her, I told her, hey, my name is Keith Wonder. I'm living in this Bothell house, having some kind of weird stuff, but I didn't tell her what the weird stuff was. I was very careful not to tell her what it was. And her initial response first was pause and, hey, I need to talk to my husband first before I answer that question because me and him just got back together and let me clear it with him. But she gave me 3 eye winks to say, yeah, that house is trippy, but she didn't go into detail, but I didn't want to spook her. So I said, take as much time as you want. I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to spook you. I want you to report me to Facebook or whatever. 2 months later, she chimes me up on Facebook and say, hey, Keith, da-da-da-da-da. Sorry it took me so long to respond to you. Me and my husband had a long talk. He doesn't want me to do this, by the way, but I feel I owe you this because it's the Christian thing to do. And her words, not mine, was living in that house was a living hell. It was the beginning of the end in that house. And she just started going through bullet points of what they witnessed and saw. She said the kitchen cabinets opened up by themselves, doors slammed. They had a living nanny with them. Footsteps, phantom footsteps. She said one day she was outside on the patio taking a cigarette break and she left some food cooking on the stove and her baby in the high chair. She said the sliding door slammed shut on her and locked her out. Baby starts wailing. She had to get a rock to bust the glass to get back into the house. Her son got sick or developed a weird or interesting case of meningitis. Her marriage to her husband deteriorated. She became suicidal. She tried to commit suicide 4 times in the home.
Wow.
Became addicted to the painkillers and depressant medication that she was taking, as well as alcohol. So all this pool, if you will, of quote unquote bad energy in accordance to the phenomena that they were experiencing, but they were not so much calling it paranormal. They just said it was like a black cloud had positioned us over our house. and they finally they finally moved out. They were only in the house for a little bit over a year, and they just upped and moved, but they never told anybody. They just upped and moved. And she said her son, the one who developed meningitis, saw shadows at the corner of his eye. He still sees them to this day. This is back in 2014. He still sees them to this day, little shadowy figures. And when she told me that his room, meaning her kid's room, was my office, that was all I needed to know. Because my office, as anybody who's read Jenny's book and mine, or studies my notes, or Steve Mara's notes and Dawn's notes, know the office is the most active room in the house. And next to it is the hallway. When she told me that was her son's office, and keep in mind, that's where I saw the apparition twice, right outside the door, looking like Rhonda. That was it for me. That confirmed once again, because me and Tina for a while thought, hey, is it us? Did something follow us? Is it, do we got some bad mojo or whatever? Because you never know, right? But
right.
5 years before us, no, it's not us. It was, we walked here and it was already here. The kid cough confirmed that. Yeah, these spirits were here when we got here.
Now, Jenny, he made an interesting point there, asking, was it us? Are we the cause of this? And traditionally, for quite a while now, parapsychologists, when it comes to poltergeist, they usually, the general consensus, take that as it is that usually a poltergeist house, there's usually a focus, like a girl going through a puberty or something along those lines. But with the exception of like really extreme cases, like maybe, stage, 6 or 7 or 99, they never really get to the point that Keith and Tina were seeing in their house.
Yeah, that's a really unusual, particularly when there was no focus individual really. And like I said, I think that's what's so interesting about this case, because it almost seemed like a mixture, because normally, parapsychologists, who have been doing this for years and years, will make a distinction between this is a poltergeist outbreak, which is based on, the energy emitting from a living person, a focused individual, and a haunting, which has to do with the location. But it seemed like this had elements of both, and it wasn't really clear which one it was, because, obviously there was no focus individual in this case. And, even sometimes in the cases where the focus individuals, they don't necessarily have to be a kid. It usually is. But anytime there's any kind of like emotional turmoil or, some really, really large emotional trauma going on, like within the family structure, usually that can kick off that type of thing. But it seemed like it really didn't occur in this instance. Like he said, they moved in, and the first night before their furniture was even there, they were experiencing phenomena. So clearly it wasn't anything to do with them specifically, even though the longer he lived there, it really seemed to be, a lot of the manifestations seemed to be targeting him specifically, which is really, really strange. It's just a really strange and fascinating case, which, like I said, was the reason that Steve Mara was so interested in, the reason I was interested in it enough to, write a book about Steve's experiences there, because it was just all over the place. I've never really read about another case like that.
Well, there, and I could see where this would be really, perplexing, because there were a lot of, similarities between what Keith was going through. Say like the writings on the walls. It reminds me of the Humpty Doo poltergeist case in Australia, where the poltergeist was using pebbles to leave messages on the floor to to the occupants.
Yeah, making little names and symbols and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and there was another case in California, and I can't remember where it was, where whatever it was leaving very intelligent messages on the bathroom window. Bathroom mirror. for a number of years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that case, but whatever the entity was, it had targeted the author's mother-in-law and said that it was there to kill her for a sacrifice, and actually apported a very old African type of sacrificial knife, into their house at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, oh yeah. But this case is, like falls. The only difference that I can see, with the exception of the EVPs that you experienced, is a lot of times when a poltergeist gets this advanced, it starts talking, and not just
Yeah.
not EVP talkings, but like Bell Witch talking, or Jeff the talking mongoose. Which
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know Tim Beckley wants me to mention. This is the new book that we're going to be coming out with at the beginning of the year. But Keith, I mean, did you, with the exception of the EVPs, I mean, did you ever hear anything along those lines where whatever it was talking to you out loud?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much talking to me because I'm familiar with the Bell Witch and the manga, because I've been, trying to find cases similar to my own. But, and those, the Bell Witch was having conversations with the house occupants and tormenting them. But no, it was weird. Me and Tina would sometimes be, it's a big house, 2-story. I'm upstairs, she's down, or vice versa. And I would walk downstairs and walk to the couch and say, "What do you want?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You called me." And so she's like, "No, I didn't." And vice versa. Or I'll be in the office one day and she'll walk in, "Yeah, what do you want?" I'm like, "I didn't call you." And that would go on for like a year and a half. And because we didn't know poltergeist and the levels and the talking and not talking. And we didn't know what a EVP or AVP was, or disembodied voice. But Steve and Dawn had an episode when they brought Nick Kyle the second time around, when they were once again in the hallway, and they just heard a woman, I forgot what the woman said directly, but just blurted out something. And Steve and Dawn heard it. I wasn't even there. And both of those guys were like, wow, they stopped dead in their tracks, like, wow. But yeah, that happened a lot, just voices blurting out, but nothing to the level, and thank God, of the Bell Witch and the Talking Mongoose case, of them talking, "Hey, I'm going to get you," or "You're in trouble," or, and that, because I don't know how I would handle that specifically. But I mean, the wall writings, the DKL, leaving nasty notes on the wall in my car, and stuff like that. That's close. That might be a level or two below that, but yeah, that's close.
So now Tina's reaction to all of this, through the years, I mean, what was going on with her? Because I mean, we've talked about, like what you did, put up cameras and record things, and what was she doing?
Tina, we had a sort of a tag team of, Tina was trying to get churches in the home as soon as possible, and I was trying to get paranormal teams in the home as soon as possible. And a lot of times the phenomena would happen around us, but we sort of, when we could, easier said than done, just form ranks and close ranks and try to have a united front, but it's easier said than done. But overall, Tina had the same mindset I have of, we need to figure this out, and if y'all telling us it's okay to stay here and fight this battle, and y'all gonna help us, we'll stay and fight it, but we don't want to fight it alone. What went south for Tina was the episode of how she was portrayed on Ghost Adventures, because going back to that agent theory of, oh, it's the woman, or it's an adolescent child or female child, the ending of that episode sort of painted, or the audience took it that way based on it being constructed that way, of it might be Tina, when the lead investigator, Zach Baggins, said, "I'm feeling a weird uneasy feeling around Tina," and then the show just abruptly goes off and everybody's like, "Oh, Tina, figured it, yep, it's her, yep, that's her, that's it, case closed, next." And that took a real toll on her, and I put it in the book. She moved out a few weeks after that episode aired.
Let's do it. Well, in the final segment of the program, which we're going to have to be going to a break in about 3 minutes, I want to get in a little bit more about Zach's coming to your house and Steve Mara as well, because thank heavens,
Yeah.
you got Steve to come over, because some of these other methods, either using the church or these the psychic investigators, it really wasn't working.
No, it wasn't working. And like I said, we've been spinning our wheels, and like you said earlier, these poltergeists, regardless of what level they are, they don't suffer fools. They don't feel sorry for you if you do the wrong thing. They just make it worse and ratchet up a notch, because they're like, oh, you want to sage? Go ahead, go right ahead, go ahead and sage. Because the first wall writings in our home were written with sage sticks. I mean, they would take our sage sticks and use our own weapons, if you will, our own tools against us by writing the symbols and the words on the office wall, and leave you with half a sage stick when you come home. So that lets you know, psychologically, hey, that doesn't work on us. And we go back to the people who gave us the advice in the first place, and the only thing they can say is, you got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. You got to be persistent. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to our bottom of the hour break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of the investigators that came to the Hell House. That's all I can say on Exploring the Bizarres. Thank you.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the final segment of Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight we're talking with Keith Linder and Jenny Ashford. So, Keith, tell us about how reality television got involved in the investigation of your house.
Yeah, so Como News, which is in Seattle, we had been experienced, by now we've experienced over 2.5 years of activity and had really exhausted all means of local help. And I believe it was one of our neighbors notified Como News about our house being haunted. They called me up and said, hey, we want to do a story on the home. I thought it would be a good way to get more eyes and ears as far as help. And when they came into the home, this was around Halloween time of 2014, they did a segment. Upon leaving, because they heard the loud bang, the reporter who was doing the segment heard one of the loud bangs and terrified her, but she said that she was a friend of Dave Schrader. She said that she would call Dave Schrader tonight and let her know what she experienced. Dave called me the next day, and I was at work. We talked about 15 minutes, and he said, hey, I know Ghost Adventures. I know Zach and crew. We'd be appreciative to come to your house and investigate, but, and see what you got. But we need you're a rental, so we need your homeowner to sign off. So I went to the homeowner. I've been keeping him up to date on the activity. He gave the thumbs up and said, just keep him apprised. Once again, he never set foot in the house, but keep him apprised via email. And so, yeah, as you know, the guys came, I believe, a month or so later. And but their investigation was very short. What you don't see in the episode makes 45-minute episode, but the guys, hardcore investigation was probably about 4 to 5 hours. I would say 5 hours. And even I, not knowing anything about the paranormal, never investigated a haunted house or a haunted location, I know these entities. 5 hours is nothing. If they went dormant for a year and 2 months, what's 5 hours? But we didn't hear from them for 2.5 months. We didn't know how the episode was going to look, how we was going to be betrayed. And when the episode aired February, I think 25th or 28th of 2015, when the world sees, that's when me and Tina saw it. And that's when my homeowners saw it. We were not being kept updated. We didn't even know they found nothing until we saw the episode. And yeah, we got a lot of slack for that from the paranormal community, meaning those that were fans of the show. Of being hoaxers, fakers. Tina did it, the girl did it, she looks weird, it's her. Keith's da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Y'all wasted Zach Bagans' time, or Ghost Adventures' time. So that made me drill down, especially after the cause and breakup of our relationship, because once again, Tina moved out soon after that, especially when she was painted as being the fall guy. So that made me drill down and just spend countless hours in the Seattle Public Library researching the term poltergeist, because by then I had heard the term. I found a lot of parapsychology books, and there was Steve Marron's name in a lot of them. I was surprised that all the books I was reading about poltergeist, majority of them was coming out of the UK. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. But I emailed a lot of organizations, and Steve Marron replied to my emails after I sent him a couple of emails, and he was very inquisitive about the photos. And yeah, so him and his chief researcher Dawn came about 4 months after that.
Jenny, why don't you tell us a little bit about how Steve did his investigation? I mean, what the difference is between, somebody who takes this seriously like Steve does and the difference between that and reality television.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Steve told me that he was actually very reluctant to take on the case at first, mostly because it had been investigated by Ghost Adventures and there was so much like negative baggage already attached to it. The thing about reality TV and a lot of these paranormal shows is they're primarily entertainment. They're not for research purposes or anything like that. So their whole goal is to, make something happen in the house or edit it so that it looks like something. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I saw the Ghost Adventures that was done at Keith's house, and I'm not a big fan of Ghost Adventures. I'm not a big fan of paranormal TV shows in general. But that was just, it seemed very lazy, seemed a little bit like a hack job. And so I could see how you would be angry about that and how you would want, some vindication after a TV show portrayed you in that way. So, I think that kind of was one of the things, I mean, that and all of the evidence that Keith was so careful about collecting and, keeping track of, that I think impressed Steve enough that he came over there. And I think that, I mean, his main thing, he and Don Phillips, the first time they came, because they came 2 times. The first time they came for 6 days. They stayed in the house 24/7. They basically, as soon as they got there, they set up all their equipment, and and every day they had recorders going. They had everything going all the time, so that if anything happened at any point, they would be able to record it. And they were also very diligent about, taking samples every day, taking readings every day of pretty much every, factor that you could think of, just to rule out any other explanation. I mean, they not only took EMF readings like you see on the TV shows, but they take, like magnetic fields and, pretty much anything. It's, temperature readings, multiple times a day, just so they could know what the baseline was, so they could know if something, was anomalous and would not be, could not be attributed to readily apparent rational causes. So I think they were very, stringent in trying to do that type of thing, it seemed to me. And, they kept up with all the equipment. They had, 6-8 big boxes of equipment and kept everything running all the time. And like I said, the second time, when they came back the second time, they actually stayed for 8 days and brought Nick Kyle along with them, from the Scottish, the Paranormal Society. And so there were 3 of them, all being in the house pretty much all the time. So they actually, and they weren't on camera. They weren't trying to get anything. They were just, I get the impression from Steve that he genuinely wants to help people out. I mean, he's worked on a lot of cases that he doesn't really talk about. And he's he's not one to like want to be in the spotlight, I guess. So he's just basically really interested, and he's just trying to help people to live in their houses without this activity going on. So it seems like that's his main focus, whereas, you know, a paranormal TV show, their main focus would be to entertain. So, you know, sometimes them and the residents are at cross purposes, where I feel like Steve is kind of trying more to help the families that he goes to investigate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and not too long, Keith, I guess after Steve and Don showed up, I mean, the activity started. I mean, weren't you going to prepare a meal or something for him, and something happened?
Yeah, that was when they first arrived. I think it was day 2 or day 3, and the guys were working hard, 18 hours a day, nonstop. And you know, you're eating hamburger helper, pizza, DiGiorno's, and all that. And I was like, you guys came all that way. At least I can cook for you your last day. We're going to all have a salmon dinner. Seattle's known for salmon. I'm going to go buy some king salmon. But I'm vocalizing all this, right? I'm talking to them, and I'm vocalizing all this. And I think the last day, their friend Patty said, you know, I'm going to take you guys downtown to the Space Needle so y'all can take some photos. Y'all haven't seen Seattle. So I'm cooking and I'm prepping. As soon as they peel out of the driveway, I put the salmon in the oven. And I close the oven, and it's one of those electrical ones, hint, hint. And I put on the temperature. As soon as I turn my back to the oven, sparks start flying. Pow, 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 boom, ping, ping. You know, out the back of the stove, in the stove, everywhere. I had to quickly pull the stove out and unplug it. And it's fried now. They come back 3 hours later, and you can see the outlet is kind of fused and smoky. And I'm like, dude, that just, yeah, the oven's dead. And I have no salmon to cook for you guys. So yeah, we ended up eating pizza again that night. When Steve and them got back to the UK, by then I called once again the landlord, let him know, hey, your oven is gone, dude, and let him know that I have nothing to cook with. So he called Sears, and they come and drop another oven off, and they're like, well, you're going to take this one? He's like, yeah, we're going to take this one. The electrician's got to come check out the wiring in the wall, make sure this don't happen again. Find nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. And the guy pulling the oven is like, ovens don't explode.
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, he's been doing it, once again, 30, 40 years, and, you know, ovens don't explode. And these power outlets, they don't shoot sparks and flames out. And it was just interesting. And of course, I know, I get it. I've seen worse happen. But yeah, it was just like I said, some of these spirits, they're just pesky like that. They love to rub salt in your wound and just like, no, you guys are not going to eat salmon tonight. No, we're not. No, there's no salmon tonight, guys. And that's what it was. That's all it was.
Just to piss you off.
Yeah, just to get you angst up. Yeah. And 2 years ago, I would have threw the middle finger up in the air. I would have threw a middle finger at the ceiling, not knowing what I'm throwing it at. I would have used all kind of slurs and epithets, and then I probably would have had a bar stool thrown at me.
Yeah. Well, I started saying, and that's, you know, it seems like that's the type of energy that they're wanting, that, you know, to,
yeah, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing.
To vex you, so to speak. You know.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this, you know, early in the program. I just now remembered it. You had an interesting story where you had you were doing a beta test on a video game system.
Yeah, when Microsoft. Yeah, once again, I'm a geek that way. So, the new Xbox One after the original Xbox, I signed up to be a beta tester for the console. What that entails is Microsoft is going to come to your home and drop off one of their prototypes for 6 months. You're going to have the original Xbox One before anybody else has it for 6 months. You're going to play it. We're going to give you games to play, scenarios and role plays, and we're going to observe you. The thing is, we're going to observe you from afar, meaning remotely, because you're on Xbox Live. And 2, every now and then we want to come to your house to observe you. And this was in 2015. So that night in particular, about 5 or 8 of them come to my house, all kind of gear, monitoring gear, cameras, and all that stuff, and set up, got me hooked up to wires. But they just want to watch me play. And halfway through the night, I'm playing games. I'm doing what they tell me to do. The project manager, who's got a clipboard in her hand or his hand, he's got an earpiece in his ear, and he's like, "Hold up, stop. The guys at headquarters, which is Redmond, found something. They got an anomaly on the screen. They see you, Keith, but they're picking up shadows around the room that they can't account for. So we need to pause and let them figure this out." And then one of the other engineers took the game console and put it on, I forgot what input, to now we all got gray screens. And you see these shadows, these orbs, just floating in the air back toward the kitchen. I mean, they're just floating. And and these are smart guys. These are developed. These are coders. These are analysts, technicians, and engineers, and the guys who create this stuff. And they've never seen that before, and it stops them dead in their tracks. And at that time they're about a month away from launching the Xbox, and they're trying to get it out the door before the Christmas holidays to beat Sony's PlayStation 4. And they see these things, and they cannot account for them. I think I said it in the book. I wish I was able to get a copy of that video, because they save everything. But by then, I didn't know what I was looking at. Whether they would have given it to me, I don't know, because I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But it was just interesting to see these guys' reaction, and it almost derailed the project, because they were like, if we can't ascertain where these things are coming from, we don't want little Johnny open up his Christmas present on Christmas Day and he's got shadows everywhere, because they're thinking it's a bug. They think there's something wrong with the code. But it perplexed them. They were very perplexed.
Well, and not being a gamer, I can't remember now what the system is. What is it? The Kinect?
That's what it was. Kinect. Yeah.
Yeah, the Kinect. Okay, well, you know that there are a lot of ghost hunters now that are using that. They'll take it with them on investigations in haunted areas, and there's been some successes. You get these like stick figures that aren't there. Yeah. So I mean, I found that section in your book just really interesting. It was like you may have been one of the first ones to find that out.
Yeah, the Kinect at that time, I think it was first generation. And they brought the Kinect in, set it on my entertainment center, and these movements, the Kinect was picking up movements in and around the house that wasn't me. I mean, you could see me, you could see the guys, and it blocks everybody else out. There's a setup process to where it removes false positives. The Kinect cannot explain those images, and that's what stopped the Microsoft guys dead in their tracks, because they couldn't explain it.
Wow, fascinating. Okay, Jenny, I want to go back real quick back to Steve's investigation of the house. Now, I know that in order for you to write the book, that you had to go through a lot, everything that Steve connected out of all the stuff that you went through. What do you think? What fascinated you the most? What surprised you the most with all the information that Steve and Don were able to gather?
One of the most interesting things to me, I think a lot of the stuff that they got that actually creeped me out the most was things like, Keith had cameras all over the house, as he said, and a lot of times they would go missing, or they would break, or they would be turned around, or whatever. And at one point when Steve and Don were there, Keith got a ping on his email that one of the cameras had been triggered, and it was the camera, I believe, that was facing the front door. And when he opened the photograph of, what the motion sensor had picked up, it just showed a blank wall. And so when they went in the living room to see, what was going on with the camera, it had turned itself around like 360 degrees. And there was no way that it could have done that. And the fact that it took a picture of the wall and the picture wasn't blurry, as though it had not as though it had turned around, but as though it had kind of like, just instantly turned itself around and then took the picture, because, it takes a picture like in less than a second. So the fact that had happened just like behind their backs really kind of creeped me out. A lot of the EVPs that they got creeped me out, particularly one of the ones I believe Don had bought some flowers and put them in the upper hallway. And later on, they had some EVPs. It was two women's voices. And one of them said, "Whose are the flowers?" And then the other one, as though answering, said, "Oh, that man bought them." And that really creeped me out, because I mean, the fact that these were just like commenting on things they were doing. And also another thing too is one of the like a light fixture that had fallen down in the hallway that made a really, really loud banging sound. They all heard it, and they all rushed up there to see what the banging sound was, and saw that this light had come off the wall. And it wasn't a heavy light. I think it was just made of plastic or something like that. And they tried to, when they tried to replicate the sound by, you know, like throwing it at the ground or whatever, they couldn't really get the same, you know, audiogram like in their audio program. But they said the interesting thing was that when they just dropped it, it looked the same, but it was much quieter. You know what I mean? Almost as though whatever had thrown it made it louder than it would have been if it had moved through regular physics. You know what I mean? So it's almost like it wanted them to hear it and come up and see what it had done, kind of thing. There was a lot of things like that, or, you know, where they'd hear, you know, running footsteps as though someone was running through the upper hall, like through their little optical, you know, tripwires and stuff like that, like it was trying to avoid them. And it was just little things like that. And like I said, that seems a lot more like intelligent haunting than poltergeist. I mean, a lot more like intelligent haunting. But how many, if indeed they were spirits, how many were in there? There's no telling. It was probably quite a lot.
Well, and talking about the EVPs now, you know, people who, you know, their only experience with hearing EVPs again is on these reality shows, you know, where people have a recording and they have to amplify it and like trying to guess, you know, what the voice is saying. These recordings, they're not like that.
They're really not. Most of the ones, because he let me listen to a lot of the ones that they got were, you know, what they call Class A EVPs, where it's obviously a voice. You can tell what gender the voice is. You can tell exactly what it's saying. You know, everyone agrees on what it's saying. They don't have to tell you, oh, listen, it says, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear it go, oh, yeah, it does kind of sound like that because, you know, but these ones actually did sound like, I mean, the one that Keith mentioned earlier with the voice saying, you know, it's a camera. If you listen to it, it sounds exactly like a person saying, it's a camera. I think it's a camera. It just sounds like a person was in the room, but obviously there was no person there. And I think a lot of the ones that they let me listen to that were like that they were as clear as a bell. And, you know, they had other people in the house that they'd say, okay, I'm going to play you something. Now, what is this voice saying? And, you know, the other person would say, oh, it said that's where the demons hang out. And that's exactly what it sounded like. So most of the ones they got, I mean, they got a lot of, you know, Class B and Class C ones too, but they got an alarming amount of Class A ones that just sounded like people talking. And you know, he told me, he's like, I've never seen anything remotely like that. And I've never heard of another case remotely like that either.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are coming up to the end of our program, so I want to give you both a chance to let our audience know where they can find out more about you. Jenny, let's start with you.
Okay, easiest place to find me is just my website, www.jennyashford.com, and that's got links to all my books and my podcast and everything else. If you want to check out my podcast, it's 13 O'Clock Podcast. You can find it on YouTube, or it's on iTunes and a bunch of other places too. So that's the easiest thing. Just go right to my website.
All right, and I highly recommend everyone to read your books because they're all just absolutely fantastic. Okay, Keith, what about you? Where can people find your YouTube channel, your book, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so a lot of what we talked about tonight for his video and evidence is on my YouTube channel. Just type in Keith L or Keith Linder. That's the easiest way to find it on YouTube. I made it easy that way. Of course, the book is on Amazon in Kindle and paperback version. The Bothell Hell House. If you want more information, you can go to demonsinseattle.com. There are hyperlinks to both books in both formats. But also go to americansupernatural.com because that's where the documentary of Stephen Dawn's 2.5 week investigation That's on Don's website, but you'll see what we talked about tonight, the methodology that Steve incorporates in the 2.5-week investigation. And like I said at the beginning of the show, like you said, don't judge now, judge after you watch the documentary or after you read the book. And I guarantee you will have a new mindset.
Well, and I do recommend that everybody go out and get your book, the Bothell House version 2.0. Was there a first version, and then you did an update, Keith?
Yeah, at that time, because the evidence that Steve and Dawn were still, new and coming. So there was new video put into the book, new pictures and photographs. I mean, it's over 8 hours of audio, over 40 hours of video in the book if you watch it back to back of the audio and the video. But that's why it was called 2.0.
Okay, well, like I said, I highly recommend that if you're interested in this subject, get Keith's book, get Jenny's book, and be on the watch out for our new book, Jeff the Talking Mongoose, coming out at the beginning of the year. So I'm going to sign us off here. Thanks for listening to Exploring the Bizarre. Good night, Tim. Good night, everyone.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.